Good morning. It's been a little while. Last week I wasn't on live. I was busy teaching in the virtual classroom on Monday and Wednesday when I usually show up here. And then I was in the actual classroom on Friday when I normally show up here. So I'm traveling. Lighting is bad. It would have been easy to just say I'm not going to pop on today either, but I wanted to come in here. So, how are you? I hope that you're starting your week off well. Mine is going to be awesome. I'm not teaching in the classroom. Of course, that doesn't mean that I'm not working, but I'm not teaching in the classroom. So, that just frees up a whole lot of time in my schedule where I can actually get to some other things. So, since I did teach all last week, I want to look at my phone so that I can bring up the questions to talk to you about the things that did come up. You may have some of the same questions, but I don't want to forget anything, so I'm going to ask for you to just give me a minute and let me pull that note up. So I actually had several questions, obviously, but I pulled out a few that I thought would be relevant and might provide some input to other people as well. And today is for federal employees, so I'm talking specifically about questions that came out of that federal class. The first one here is I'm trying to figure out my husband's retirement calculations, but I have a couple of questions. Looks like the years of service he has started on January 12th of 2014 when he went from temporary employment to career conditional employment, and he was working part-time at that point, 48 hours a week. So she's trying to figure out when her husband is going to be eligible to retire. And what she says here is absolutely correct. When we talk about temporary or term or permanent or career conditional or accepted service or competitive service, all of that stuff is talking about essentially like how did the person get into the job, what kind of appointment was it. That doesn't necessarily tell us how many hours they're working, and this is an important distinction because a lot of times employees will come and talk to me and I'll ask, well, was that a permanent position? And they'll say yes, it was full time. That's not the question. You could be permanent or temporary or term or and part-time or full-time or intermittent. And those terms are talking about the work schedule, like how many hours a week you were expected to work. So, getting back to this one, he started with the federal government in 2014. That means that he's a FERS employee, didn't have any prior time under CSRS, but he was temporary. And under FERS, temporary positions, and these are called non-deduction positions, temporaries are not covered by benefits or retirement. Some people have an opportunity to pay a little bit of money today for what they didn't pay back when they were in that temporary job, and they could get credit for it. But that cutoff was the start of 1989. Before that, people could buy the time back. After that, they cannot. So this person started in 2014. Clearly, it's after 1989. He can't buy that time back. So she's asking, does his years of service for retirement start January of what? Let's see. Oh yeah, so he moved from temporary to permanent in 2016. So that's when his clock is actually going to start for retirement. And I do make a big deal of this in the classroom because it's so important. If you started your federal career in a temporary appointment, that means it was non-permanent. Please know that unless you are CSRS, and if you are, let me know because that will change everything, but I'm not going to get into that today. Unless you were CSRS or that temporary time was before the start of 1989 and you pay the money, you make the deposit, unless one of those things is true, then your temporary time doesn't count for retirement. For anything with retirement, it doesn't get you out the door. It doesn't get used in the calculation of your pension. And the problem is that that's not really clear to employees if they don't know what they're looking for. So if you look at your leave and earning statement, your pay stub, or you look at your standard form 50 personnel action, when you see the date on there, I want you to look really closely at it because a lot of times people read it as SCD or service computation date, even though that's not what it says. It says SCD, and then in parentheses, it says leave. We blank that out, and that's not good because we then think that this date is for everything. It's for leave, it's for retirement, and it's not. If you had a temporary appointment, it will count for leave. Leave. It gets you more vacation. It moves you up to the 6 or the 8 hours of leave accrual sooner, but it will not count for retirement. So if you're not sure what you're looking at and you're just looking at this date, like this person who started the temporary position in 2014, that is when his leave starts to accrue. But if he thinks that he can retire based on that 2014 date and he doesn't check it out and he doesn't ask and he doesn't do anything, and then he just gets up to the point where he thinks he can retire, he's going to find out that he actually has to work 2 more years because that temporary time counts for leave, not for retirement. So that's a really good question. It's a really important question. And I'm so glad that she asked that so that I can talk to other people about it as well. So she's asking then, can he retire in October of 2022, which is his birthday month, after having 5 years of service, since he would be over 62 years old? And the answer to that is yes. So I have a lot of former military members that come into my classes, right? They're working for the federal government, and the military is different. With the military, if you do your 20 years, you can retire. On the civilian side, you have to do your time and you also have to be a certain age, both of those things. So the way that a person becomes eligible for a voluntary retirement, and that's the only one I'll talk about today. That's the one she's asking about. Voluntary is optional, it's regular, it's just a normal retirement. You get there by being your minimum retirement age, and that's going to run from 55 to 57. It depends on the year that you were born. But you have to be your MRA, and you have to have 30 years of creditable service. Or you could be 60 or older and have 20 years or more of creditable service. Or you could be 62 or older and have 5 years or more of creditable service. So in this case, when she's saying he's going to have his birthday in October of 2022, at that point he'll have 5 years of service and he'll be over 62. Can he retire? The answer is yes, because that's a regular retirement. There's no penalty. Now, he will get only if it's 5 years, and he actually has 8, but if he had 5 years, it would be 5% of his high 3 average salary. He's got 8 years, it's 8% of his high 3 average salary. Yes, he can retire, and no, he won't have a penalty, but, and this is important too, so she's giving me the whole background, and I love that. When people ask questions, if I can get the whole story, it allows me to give them a better answer. So she said, he started originally, he was working only 48 hours in the pay period. And he did that for a couple of years. Then he got the permanent position. Then he got the full-time position. So does he have a penalty? No. Can he retire? Yes. But he will have something that's called a proration factor. And that proration factor is because of his part-time service. Under FERS, which is the system that this person is under FERS, if you ever, from the beginning of your career through the end of your career, work in a part-time job, which is less than 80 hours in the biweekly pay period, and it's your normal schedule. It's not that you've got something special going on, but that's your normal schedule. If you ever work part-time under FERS, it drives a proration against your annuity at the end of your career. It's not a penalty, but it will mean that you would get only a fraction of that retirement check because you only worked a fraction of the hours that a full-time person did. So to get this proration, we would need to get into your records from date of hire to date of retire and add up all the hours that you worked, full-time, part-time, and then compare that to what a full-time person worked over that period of time. So I did this with this gentleman's hours, and he actually, because he worked 48 hours per pay period for the first 2 years, and he only has 8 years in the federal government, he worked about 88, was that what the number that I came up with? 85. He worked about 85% of the hours that he would have worked if he was full-time. So we'll calculate his retirement as if he was full-time. Creditable service, he's got 8 years right there. High 3, whatever that happens to be. Percentage, great. We multiply that all together. But then he's only going to get 85% of that check because he only worked 85% of the hours that a full-time person did. And like I said, that's not called a penalty. It's called a proration factor. It only applies if you had part-time service. And remember that part-time service does not mean that you were temporary. You could be permanent and working part-time. This gentleman happened to be temporary working part-time, but it's a very specific question, and that applied to his situation, but it may or may not apply to yours. Another question that came in during the class was, I'm working as a WG. How do I figure out my annual pay? So the first thing that I want people to understand is what a WG is. So in the federal government, we have essentially two main categories of employees. We have the general schedule, or GS, and we have the wage system, which includes wage grade, wage leader, wage supervisor. And then we have a whole bunch of other systems that we create, different bands and things of that nature. Well, the banded systems came from GS. So we still have those two main systems, but the banded systems could come from the GS. Here's one main difference. The GS, or the banded employees, receive an annual salary. The GS, or the banded employees, receive an annual salary. The WG, the WS, the WL, the wage system employees, receive an hourly wage. So they're paid differently. And that's the simplistic part, and that's all we really need to get into today. But one is paid annually and one is paid hourly. So when we talk about the high 3 average salary, which is what we use to calculate the retirement benefit, it's any 3 consecutive years when the person was making the most basic pay. But we're talking about annual. So for the GS employees, it's pretty easy. We just look at their standard form 50 and we grab their adjusted basic pay and block 20C right off their standard form 50 personnel action. We plug it in, we use it, we don't have to do anything. For these wage system employees who are paid by the hour, we have to convert their hourly wage to an annual salary before we can start working their retirement numbers. So what we would do is take their hourly rate and multiply by 2,087 hours. That's the number of hours in a work year. So hourly rate times 2,087 gives me the annual pay. Now I can plug that in, calculate my high 3, and multiply the pension out. So again, very important question. But if you are a WG, WL, WS, you have to convert your pay to an annual amount. You do that by multiplying by 2,087. What am I doing on time here? 7:15, we're good. So I had one other question here. And it is, can I deposit funds from another account from outside the government into TSP, like a traditional IRA into my TSP? And the answer is yes. For one reason or another, a lot of people aren't aware of this. I'm not really sure where the disconnect is. But when you're working for the federal government, military or civilian, you can contribute up to $19,500 into your TSP. If you are going to be 50 or older this year, you're already putting in the $19,500 and you sign up, you can do another $6,500 through something that's called catch-up contributions. But when we talk about those limits, that's new contribution. That's new money going forward that you're going to get into your TSP account before December 31st of this year. In addition to that new money, if you have traditional IRA somewhere, you work somewhere else, maybe you have a 401k or a 403b or a simple IRA, something like that, you can bring those tax deferred monies into your TSP as well. You would fill out a TSP form 60 in order to do that. Now, I want to be super clear here on exactly what I said so there's no misunderstanding. It's the traditional IRA that you could bring into your TSP. If you have a Roth IRA, you are not allowed to bring that in. You are not allowed to bring that in. Now, if you worked somewhere and your company gave you a retirement account, again, like a 401k or a 403b or a 457b, something like that, was specifically tied to that job, if that's a Roth, you can bring that into TSP. But a Roth IRA, you cannot. So, I know, like, we're out of habit, and so I saw a couple of people pop in, but it's really nice to just be back. I am planning to do my live stream this week on Wednesday and Friday as well. Like I said, I'm not teaching in the classroom, so it will be early for me, but your regular 9 o'clock Central. Hop in if you get a chance. I would love to see you. I hope that you have a great week, and I am going to get on with my day. Take care of yourself.